whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad, as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents, who are, for the most part, the material of the future growth of the immigrant-descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre. In 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? Filled with foreboding, like the Roman. I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood. That tragic and intractable phenomenon, which we watch with horror on the other side of the Atlantic, but which is interwoven with the history and existence of the states itself, is coming upon us here by our own volition and our own neglect.
Well, that lovely and haunting song is, of course, from Zurius. That is the adaptation of Rivers of Blood, the famous Rivers of Blood speech by Eunuch. And I thought that little ditty would be a good place to, a good way to set the tone for what's coming today. Today, we are joined by a very special man, a friend of mine, who has gone by many names, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But speaking of names, I would like to thank these fine people who support the stream each month. Is it going to work? It was working. Thank you, OBS, for being sluggish. Anyway, I would like to thank these fine people. If you would like to monthly support me and help me grow, you can do so on Subscribestar. Subscribestar lets you, even for $1 a month, support me as a content creator. And of course, your name will be featured at the beginning of my streams as well as the end of my videos. And a deep personal thank you from me. And also, you get more direct engagement with me. I used to run a Discord that you got access to, but that got torpedoed like 6 Discord accounts for me again. But if you are a monthly subscriber, you are part of the Subscribestar PM system. You can have direct channel of communication with me via that. And of course, I will do questionnaires, polls, let people know what's going on, talk about events on Subscribestar. So of course you'll hear about stuff like that before anyone else does. So if that appeals to you, or you just want to support my content, please throw me at least $1 a month over on Subscribestar. It means so much. And of course, one-time paid chats can be given on Entropy, Cash App, Subscribestar tips, and via PayPal comments or PayPal donations. You can type in little quips that I can read there. I've also been greenlit for hyper chats over on Odyssey, so you can give me direct dollary dues on Odyssey if you like as well. And at the end of the stream, we will be reviewing all of the community engagement that we get. If you would like to ask my guest questions or just have things you'd like to say to him or me about the topic, and we'll be getting to that in around an hour from now. So with that being said, I'm going to shut my fat mouth, and we are going to bring on my lovely guest for the evening. Well, hello, my friend. Welcome back to my channel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. Well, I guess I should give the origin myth of Cringewalker before I change my name again. Back in I think it was like 2019, 2020, 2019, sometime around then, where AA did the pro Empire posting for a while. Like the Empire did nothing wrong.
That was one of my favorite times. That was my favorite era.
Yeah, pre-pandemic is pretty much everything pre-pandemic was. But yeah, I chose the name Cringewalker to kind of like dunk on AA with those posts a little bit. There was another guy who chose Palpacringe, who I would post with. I don't know whatever happened to him, but it was Cringewalker and Palpacringe posting on AA's super chats about the Empire doing nothing wrong.
I remember that. That was fun. Those were fun times.
Yeah, and the name stuck, and then I was like, oh crap, I have a crappy name now, and if I change it, no one will know who I am. So I kept it for a few years, and I was like, I can't make anything and be taken seriously with that name. So once the AI technology started getting more mainstream, I was already pretty good at it, and I was like, maybe I'll try an AI art channel with a different name and see if that sticks better than Cringewalker, and it turns out it did.
I've got the link to your Telegram. I'm putting it into all the chats as we speak on the different platforms I'm on. You guys should go check it out. He makes amazing artwork, and that is why we're actually having a stream today, is to talk about the Restoration Bureau. Now, the Restoration Bureau, you are the creator and the sole, I guess, creator, proprietor of that thing, right? It's all you and your work, right?
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, occasionally I'll ask people for like the catchphrase recommendations, or I'll mostly I just write my own, or occasionally Prude or Turnip will say something catchy on Twitter, and I'll turn it into a poster.
Okay.
I try to do one a day. When I started, that was spurred on in part due to Trump's NFTs back 2 months ago, and I kind of hit this point. I was like, dang, there's just no one serious on the right wing, I guess. And so I was like, well, there's always this idea. I have a big fascination with the psychology behind signaling, and like how certain signals will like attract certain types of people or repel kinds. And I thought, let me make posters trying to attract the kind of right wing leader I want, and not these like cringe NFT merchants.
Yeah.
And so that started the first couple of posters were essentially like cultural statements. And one you're showing right now is a more recent one. If you want to scroll all the way up on the Twitter thing.
The one that I chose to put up first is the one I used for the thumbnail for the stream.
Yeah.
This kind of artwork really speaks to me. And I don't know, like I feel a deep connection to the people and the cultures that have led us to where we are in civilization. I've always loved history. I like mythology. I probably like mythology more than history because it's more fun and crazier.
Yeah.
But I love Tolkien. I like actual history. I like fictional history. I like role playing games. I like science fiction. And your Restoration Bureau project hits all of those things for me. I really like what you're presenting. So I'm going to leave this image up for now. And how about you tell people why the Restoration Bureau is what it is and what you are attempting to do with it as a project, or where you hope that it goes?
Yeah, I mean, I started in an attempt to art has a tendency to conform movements into a certain ideology. Usually most ideologies start from some event in history that is then artistically depicted in a standardized way. Like you were mentioning before the show, standardization. And so like for example, in the early like Romulus and Remus days of the Roman Republic / monarchy back then, there were a bunch of Latin tribes in addition to the Romans. Like even the Roman origin myth is self-contradictory. There's some versions of it where it's where they're Trojan refugees. There's some versions of it where it's Romulus and Remus, or Achilles. Like not Achilles, I forget who, but like there's a lot of contradictory local myths about the origin of Rome, and essentially they started making these like codified artistic sculptures to kind of bring everyone into a common mythos,
Uh-huh.
and thus was born the Roman monarchy. Um, and if you look up the histories of the kings of Rome before the Republic, a lot of the kings were each attempting to conform the region to like an ethos, like to also create an ethnos.
Yes.
Some of the kings focused on the god of Mars to try and make a militant people. Then they realized that all the women left and they have no women, so they kidnapped the Sabine. They
Oops.
they kidnapped the Sabine women, and then I think the second or third Roman king focused on Athena to try and make the Romans less violent. And I think I might have that. First they lost all the women, then they kidnapped the Sabine women, and then because Rome had acquired a reputation of being a rape and pillage people because they kidnapped all the Sabine women, they're like, oh, we kind of have to work on our PR a little bit, and so the Roman kings shifted to an Athena imagery, and then over time, like they switched between Mars and Athena back and forth, and it's kind of a fascinating history of like using art to try and create an identity, and eventually they landed on something of a in many city states this is how a pantheon is born,
Okay.
where the city switches between a different monotheistic god, and then they're like, what, screw it, we'll just do a pantheon and orbit between each one throughout the year. And some months get names of certain gods, and
Gotcha.
this happens a lot in ancient history. But regardless,
But the point is, art and an art message can shape an ethnos.
yeah, and the right wing in America is significantly lacking this.
Yes.
Up into the pandemic, probably the only people that had any artistic unification was probably like Pogo the artist. He's a musician. He does the music for Steven Crowder. He had a really good aesthetic rather.
Okay.
If you ever heard of his music, he's a really good artist.
I'm not very familiar with Crowder's show. And I don't want, if this ever gets to Steven Crowder, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I just don't particularly find Steven Crowder very funny.
He's like an early 2000s.
He gets on my nerves.
Era.
I like his show, and I've sampled it several times in the last many years. And the people he has on are really funny. That comedian guy that's been on a lot in the last year or two is really funny. But I don't regularly consume his show, so I don't know anything about its music tropes or anything like that.
Yeah, and so basically for the last 20 years, like the best right wing art you're gonna find are like Latin American dictatorships. That's about it. And it was really depressing because it's like, well, I mean, like, what is what even is this like aesthetic? Then it doesn't really have an aesthetic. And then people tried to pump like the Judeo-Christian stuff, and I was like, that's kind of departing. That's an American thing from the 1890s.
Yeah, I really don't like that term Judeo-Christian. To me, it's like just as fake Fox News crap as terms like Islamo-fascist. I hate that shit.
Yeah, that term can be dated to around the 1880s and 1890s, and it doesn't really exist before that. And they kind of resurrected it during the Bush era. and the Reagan era, but like it was kind of like cringe stuff, and there were like for a while there was like the Ron Paul aesthetics, and then it became a meme of like we're waiting for the end of the world, right? Like
It's all happening.
Yeah, like 2012, oh, I think it was that Ron Paul campaign. That was like top right wing aesthetics for the last decade. I was like, this is really depressing.
Yeah, if that's the best we got, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bleak. So
yeah,
that's one of the things that led you to wanting to have an artistic expression in whatever dissident or reactionary movement is coming.
Yeah, and so I know propaganda art pretty well. I studied it a bit for fun in college because there's like different like origin myths of propaganda in different time periods. It's kind of one of those artistic styles that comes and goes in history, and it always makes a new origin myth every time it comes. These posters I've been making are predominantly based off of actually a communist who I wanted to re-engineer to serve the dissident. There's this
That's
guy.
good because their propaganda game visually was very strong. So that's a good model to learn from.
Yeah. If you look at the link I posted, I think it was one of the last links I sent you on Twitter. But
sure, I'll go look now. Let me hide this real quick. There we go.
Yeah, his name's John Hartfield, and he was this like Weimar Republic cringy propagandist. But he did good work. A lot of his work was trying to make an aesthetic to counteract the mid-century Germans, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of his stuff was trying to make the Weimar Republic look good, but of course the Weimar Republic was one of the worst, most degenerate regimes in history, and so it didn't really work.
Yeah.
And so his name is John Hartfield because he was actually in the 1930s and 20s.
I pulled him up now, so you can talk about him as we scroll down here.
Yeah, and so in the 1920s and 30s, Germany had this really weird post-war like micro culture. Which I will essentially say, in the same way there are people that are weebs in our culture to Japanese culture, there were these really like Brit weebs. They were really into British culture, and so he was born. I think that's his name there, Helmut Hertzfield. I don't know. He had a different name, and so he renamed himself to an English name, John Hartfield. And this microcosm in Germany was like they were all naming themselves into English names. They were trying to pretend to be British in Germany. Like they were trying to like basically be weebs if instead of Japan it was
Anglo weebs.
Yeah, it was really weird, and they were kind of like really into making Germany into Britain, and the propaganda went with it. And so John Hartfield made a lot of art. If you scroll down a bit, if it's in this page, I don't know. There's a lot of his propaganda was one of the first to use photography collage. I think he pretty much invented collages. In the style to like express like political messages, and so a lot of it was targeting working men and women, and stay-at-home women, to like the dangers of fascism and stuff like that. Ironically, when the mid-century Germans took over, they tried to capture him to make him do work for them, and he fled the country. Mm-hmm. Guess where he fled to?
Would it be England, perhaps?
No, he fled to Czechoslovakia, which was of course invaded shortly after.
Yeah,
necessitating. He then fled to Austria, which was then also invaded. So eventually he fled to England, where the English did not really trust him because he was fleeing from Germany, and so they kind of like semi-house arrested him. And then the funny story is, like, after the war, he wanted to go back to Germany, but because he was a communist, he chose East Germany. And the East Germans did not trust him because he stayed in the West during the war. So in an ironic twist, he basically spent the last years of his life in a communist country, claiming he was communist, but being called a capitalist. Because and so he kind of just like he basically picked all the wrong moves in his life. He made good art, but just like one wrong move after another. And so he died in poverty, relative poverty, and forgotten basically. But his art is like probably some of the best I've seen in a while.
Is there a sample of his art you want to look at, or do you want to just move on to your art and talk about how you were inspired by him?
Let me see if I sent that. If you scroll down there, you'll see. If you scroll down, you'll see some of his art. It kind of pops up as you scroll. It's annoying.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you might be familiar with the hand. This is a famous hand grabber.
Yeah, I've seen the hand before. That's pretty famous. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you keep scrolling down, there's one he did one about Yeah,
I
that one of the
remember this one. I've
newspaper.
seen this one before. The one with
The one,
Marx in
the
it.
one on the left there.
I've seen.
Left of that with the newspaper. So
Yeah.
that's a famous one where it's like if it basically translates to if you read bourgeois media, you're like in a mess. I forget what it translates to, but a lot of his like photo collages are relatively famous to those who know them. His art has mostly been forgotten. So I thought, well, his art was pretty like nationally famous in Weimar Germany. Why not like reinterpret it in a kind of reactionary style?
Okay.
Well, to complete the story, actually, ironically, after he fled continental Europe, the mid-century Germans made a lot of their propaganda in his style. So like the mid-century Germans were so interested in his style that if they couldn't have the man, they just took the style and reinterpreted it to their movement. So it is a style which can be adapted to almost any politics. It just so happens that like I kind of trained an algorithm to do it really well. And so
Nice.
a lot of the posters are basically based off of this style, with little influences from Norman Rockwell and other regionalist styles. Anyway, just to show the audience, so if they see anything familiar in my art, they know where it came from.
Sure. Well, I can toggle it back to Twitter now.
Yeah.
And you shared a lot of things with me. Which one of these pieces do you want to talk about first?
Let's just start from the start because it probably goes
Okay.
like with a bit of a narrative. We'll probably skip a few of them, but
I'll go bring up this one
right
first.
there. Yeah, so that was the first one I made. I think it's the first one I made. There may be some lost in Twitter that I made that didn't make it to the Telegram. I don't remember. But it's like the goal was to have short witticisms that made you think. So like tolerance doesn't clean streets, reportful. It's kind of a short statement. Like, yeah, I mean, tolerant cities are usually the filthiest in America, right? So it's kind of like ironic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so yeah, that one shot. I think this still has like 4,000 likes on Twitter or something. It was probably it still remains one of the most popular ones, and so it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
You
want to move on to the next one now?
Yeah. If you have any thoughts on it, you can say like opinion or anything.
Not yet.
That one came a little bit later. They're not in chronological order really. But this was kind of like more of a I call this style the wholesome Chungus style from Giant Geo.
I love him. Yeah, I'm actually going to have him on my channel here in the near future.
Nice. Yeah, he's like he reminds me of a lot of the Italians I grew up with in New York. So
oh, he's just a lovely person. I look forward to the day we meet in person. I could give him a big hug. He just seems lovable.
He's very. He coined the term wholesome Chungus nationalism.
Wholesome Chungus. I've heard him say it before. Yeah.
And so I kind of want to do some posters off of that like vibe. And so like heritage restoration begins at home. It's like kind of like is your home in order? It's a nice little humble American house with a flag, and all the other ones around there like like soapbox houses.
Yeah.
This one has a nice little curve, has a little bit of style, right? Surrounded in the past by these monstrous bricks.
Yeah.
In the background rather. And so it's like kind of like like the little house on the hill. This might be somewhat inspired by Up, the cover art of Up the movie.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's a wholesome little home where an American still has some identity, like some culture, some identity. And so it took a couple of algorithms to get it right. I wanted it like a front yard there, like it's not like one of these like brick and mortar like void.
Yeah.
That it's just like this nice little classy thing. There's some things wrong with it. Like if you look at the cars, they're not to scale with each other, and there's a lot you could criticize with it, but it gets the message across. So like the wholesome vibe.
This was early in the process, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next one then here, which is this one. I like this one. I have things to say about this one, but you talk about it first.
Yeah, so that one's explicitly based off the one that we saw from John Hartfield that I mentioned with the paper over it. So it's kind of like reinterpreting John Hartfield's art in a reactionary way. Like the Varsity Dies in Darkness, you're covering your head with propaganda, you're surrounded by darkness, this is one of the earlier this one I decided to sell as a magnet without the text, and people bought a few magnets of it. It was pretty nice. Yeah, say what you want, say what you think about it, because I'm interested to see what people think about this piece.
I like this piece because of course, my whole life I have heard the phrase "democracy dies in darkness," etc. But the reason why I like this is it gets across the meme that we need to spread, which is news does not inform, news pushes
Conforms.
news pushes conformity, not
Yeah.
being informed. And I think that this is something that if we can mimetically spread this to enough people, then hopefully they will have children and families and communities that wean themselves off of the IV drip of cancerous lies, which is media and press. And
Yeah.
I really like this meme because it says that without saying that, and that is a very important thing when you're crafting memes, is getting the mimetic idea that you want to propagate to be baked into it without having to say it.
Yeah, people tell me to remove the text on the top. We didn't turn off your lights. It's like kind of a gimmick. I agree with that criticism. I've
It's
made
it's a
versions
little
without the text.
heavy-handed at the top, yeah.
Yeah.
But
No, I mean I agree that there's a theory of communication signaling, like I mentioned, where like it, the way to basically disrupt a regime isn't to like amass some grand militia army or something. It's just like you said, like cut off the IV drip.
yeah,
If you can create disformity in the message or in the source of the information, you effectively create divergence. And the key to take it down the regime is not fighting it.
right.
It's creating divergence of opinion, and that will
Yeah.
just take care of itself.
And
Because
and like we talk
yeah,
about, like I talk to a lot of people who are from the Mises libertarian camp of build it and they will come. I think that a big part of culture is people want to be part of an active, healthy, fun culture that is inviting to them.
yeah,
And to fight the current regime, like we talk about all the time, there's no amount of bullets we're not going to be able to shoot our way out of this problem that we're in. That's just silly.
yeah, yeah,
So
and
the way that we can fight is creating anything cultural, businesses and schools and church groups and community groups and families that give people alternatives that are actually appealing to the cancer that's being forced on them by the system. And then you naturally want to build something strong from people who are just wanting to go about their lives and not be part of this cancer.
yeah. I mean, so I had a thought and I lost it, but
It'll come back to you. It'll come back to you.
repeat what you said last second there. I just it went in and
We
out.
okay, just to sum up, I talk to a lot of people that are all about parallel building, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the build it and they will come approach, because you don't necessarily want to appeal to just dissident radicals. You want to appeal to people who create culture and build families and churches and businesses and things, and you pull those people together to give others options of something that's more appealing than the cancer of the system that they are trapped in. You want
yeah.
people to naturally migrate towards something healthier, and that's how ethnos gets built.
And that's what I wanted to say. Like that, in many ways, the never-ending march of humiliation rituals that Americans are subjugated to are essentially ways in which the regime self-filters for anything that's divergent. And
Yeah,
so as divergence from the head, like from the regime's propaganda, as divergence from the regime's own propaganda grows, the humiliation rituals will increase in severity in order to filter out people, because the regime wants people that will just go with the flow no matter how ridiculous, and so it will
right.
make more ridiculous things to identify people that think. And this, in many ways, this process is desirable, because as it becomes more extreme, the number of people in that inner circle of the regime shrinks, and the strength of it decreases.
And the
And
people that are of strong character, that are individually creative, like my friend Christopher, who's in chat here today, he's not particularly political. He doesn't really care about dissident stuff, but the system itself, to him, as a creator of genuinely good fiction and real narrative, well, the system spits out people like him because he won't conform. He won't just make
yeah,
more corporate trash. He won't make soulless garbage. So it pushes him away. And so it's our job as people who want to craft culture to give people like him the Lebensraum, so to speak, that they need to flourish. And I think that's what we should be creating. And that's why I wanted to feature you today, is because I feel like this is in the same vein of what I've been talking about the last year or so.
yeah. In many ways, you want the regime to become more ridiculous, because every time it makes a shift towards the ridiculous, it sheds independent thinkers to its own dissidents. The regime
Yes.
thinks, the regime's short thinking. It thinks, oh, I'm I'm purifying the doubters, but what's really happening is I'm shrinking the loyalty base. And as long as the regime doesn't notice that it's actually shrinking its loyalty base, and it while it assumes it's increasing its loyalty core, you're basically it's basically like the regime's committing suicide, and that's the easiest way to take down a regime. Like this is actually how the Western European nations took down the Ottoman Empire. Over a generation, they just pumped more ridiculous things about the Ottoman Empire, so that the independent like little ethnoses within the Ottoman Empire started turning to themselves rather than the Sultan. And little by
Yeah.
little, like the Greeks broke off, the Albanians broke off, and like the Egyptians broke off, until eventually it was just Turkey. And so like many countries know this and have used it very well in history to cut away at a seemingly monolithic entity. America is actually doing this now in China in terms of the southern semi-independent city-states versus Beijing. They're kind of trying to wedge into that little cultural divergence and essentially birth a southern ethnos that will split away. We can do this too if we play into it. You can create something of an American rural identity that splits, but you should really try to aim to divide the city states of America. Like why is New York not California? Cut into that and cause a little bit of havoc there, and you'll start to actually chip away at the regime's unity.
I think that's not a bad approach. That's pretty good. Let's move on to the next image now. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, also based off John Hartfield's. This is another one, but basically it's a redo of the first one, but in a medical way, right? It's like the stress of all your medicines. I have a lot of antidepressant posters.
Yeah, I also don't like antidepressants. As someone who has tried them, many people that I have cared about deeply in my life have gone down the path of doctors prescribing them antidepressants to try to help them through a hard time or to help them feel better. And every single time, it has always ended up making them worse over time. I do not like the antidepressant circus that goes on in our country. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's also based off bunk science that you can chemically treat what is a neurological thing. Neurological problems are born from your neurons developing cycles that they try to maintain. Chemistry can manipulate that, but fundamentally you have to cut off the neurons that are stuck in that cycle. You have to break the cycle in your brain, and that requires behavioral changes, actions, not chemistry but behavior, that then forces those neurons to abandon their loops and reinforce new ones. The saying is gone, like the fastest way to stop being depressed is to do literally anything, like just go out and do something, because the neurons in your head that are stuck on hating yourself and depressing yourself will then start to form new patterns on like nature watching or a new skill set. And
that's one of the reasons I started my morning walk series, is to fight the burden that I felt and the depression that I felt of trying to go against the regime, trying to give people some positive message about just being a white person or being an American patriot or being a Christian or whatever. It was such a depressing, heavy weight on my shoulders. I needed a way to step away from that, and just going outside and being a part of nature and taking a nice morning stroll every morning to just smell the air and look at the beautiful life around me. That tremendously helps, even if I just do it 10 or 15 minutes a day. It's a huge, huge help. And that, I think, has been healthier to my brain than any amount of pharmacopoeia could ever be.
Yeah. And like that, I've often, one of the posters I didn't post here, but it plays on the fact that pharma is the Greek word for witchcraft. And so like whenever you see witchcraft in like ancient scriptures like the Bible or other texts, they're talking about pharmacies. Pharmaceuticals that affect the brain were considered witchcraft.
Witchcraft. Now the next image is a striking one that I really like. Why don't we talk about filth is indistinguishable from ruin? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, as a resident of New York City, this is something that hits me hard every day. What's the difference between a pile of trash and a ruined building, right? It's the same thing. Ruins aren't made. People have this idea that ruins are made because something was destroyed actively, but ruins are also made by things just no longer being maintained passively. And the same with your the famous Jordan Peterson quote, "Clean your room." That's like the simplest thing you can do to prevent a ruin. Like if your room is a mess, you are living in a ruin. It is the ruins of all the things you've acquired. Like you've acquired a lot of things. They have been placed around your room. If you haven't ordered them, you are in the ruins of your own private civilization. You're not a person. You're the ruins of a person. So once you associate filth with ruin, it can really help you like motivate cleaning yourself. Like I speak this as someone whose room is currently half cleaned and half not. So it's like, yeah, I'm half a ruin.
My room is very clean and ordered. I like to live an ordered existence, and I think that's one of the problems of modernity that we face. And this is getting really meta here, but hear me out. Is we sort of grow up in ruins because if you look at what was done to us in the 1900s with the two great world wars coming off of the War of Southern Secession, you had so many generations of men being exsanguinated and lied to about the cause of why they were being killed. And that creates a type of social ruin that gave way to, in my opinion, the materialist anti-white lies of the 1950s. Like, I don't buy into for a moment that the whole nuclear family, atomic family thing is anything other than the Soviet style live in the pod, eat the bug shit that Americans would buy at the time. Because when you look at all the propaganda back then, it showed men in a little house in a subdivision with one or two kids, a dog, and a wife, and he went to work for the state or a big company, and everyone was expected to live this little cookie cutter lifestyle. And to me, knowing what I do about propaganda and the evil people who have tried to take control and shape humanity for the last 90 years, it seems like that was the pod people, bug man version of what they could sell to people at the time. And and I think that this is a message that young people that are dissidents now, this is why there's such a divergence with boomers and people that are like younger than 40, let's say, is I don't think that the dissidents younger than 40 look at the 1950s, I just want to grill and go to work people. I don't think they view that as something good we should go back to. And I think that's healthy because I think that was a lie from the beginning. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like, that was a social experiment of the post-war era that barely lasted a decade before it degenerated into the 1960s.
But the ghost still lingers today, and it affects a lot of people, even people that aren't boomers.
Yeah. Like that's the ideal that people will return to when it was really just an artificial creation of a post-war wealth. Like if you want to find proper American identity, you really do have to go back to like the early 1900s and 1800s. That was like the proper American identity. Once the America became an empire, this like transatlantic identity started propping up in the cities. That was like presented as the new norm when it was really just like social amputation. There's a poster about that coming up probably. But yeah, I mean, like, how do you create a ruin? You become filthy, and part of those filths are like you forget to maintain your relationships, your extended family and neighbors. I've always found it weird that like I grew up in a suburb, and it's really weird that I don't know anything about my neighbors. There's like one neighbor I was friends with that I still keep in contact with. And beyond that, nothing. Like everyone on my block is a stranger to me that I say hi to every day, and I know that's not normal. I know that's
not normal at all. Yeah, that was one of the things I noticed because I grew up in a very rural Appalachian area, and it is true most people here are from the islands of Albion and heritage. My family, particularly English and Scottish, we have a lot of Irish in this area too, and one of the things that was a stark difference when I left to go to college in the 90s is I noticed that even smaller cities, which is like 100,000, 150,000 people, no one knew anybody. Nobody knew what anybody was doing. But where I came from, you knew the name of people. You knew why people had businesses. You knew the names of people that owned and ran the schools and the shops and the things around me. And I found that really it was sort of mind-breaking going to college and going to different cities in my 20s. And I would get an apartment or I would go and live with people for a few weeks or a couple of months just to get to know a city. And it was so shocking to me how even people around each other wouldn't really know anything about each other other than, yeah, I know this guy because he stands at my bus stop at the same time I go to work. So we talk sometimes. And it just felt like such an ugly fake life. I didn't like it.
Yeah, and when I first realized that there was an alternative when I moved upstate New York for my college and realized that people talked to each other and had neighbors and communicate with each other outside the city. and it was pretty cool. Like, I made a couple of friends. I got to know people. I like were part of their lives. I haven't really done great at maintaining those relationships since the pandemic, but like before the pandemic, we tried to like do like yearly meetups and stuff. And like I found like a community outside of New York City, and I was like, oh, this is the norm. And if you really think about it, the term atomization has gone around a lot recently, and that really is what's happening. If you can atomize everyone into a direct trough from the state word down to individual consumption of information, you kind of cut out the room for debate and discussion and divergence of opinion. In many ways, when you have an extended family you talk to regularly, you get intergenerational thought that like people start questioning the narrative. And so atomization is part of the regime's strength. By simply having someone from a different generation you talk to, even boomers, you are creating a divergent network of thinking that will spill over to the people around you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that before we move on from this image, this is really beautiful to me because it shows clean line work and a crisp, clean city. And it says filth is indistinguishable from ruin, because when you look at this cityscape, your mind doesn't think about ruin. It thinks of great buildings, great things, metropolis, the heights of civilization, and it's not filthy. It's clean, it's ordered. There's not broken facades of buildings that are chipping and falling apart. There's not detritus and human waste in the streets. Everything's clean and ordered, and I really like that. And it's just it's I don't know. I really like this. One of my favorite pieces of yours. I really like this one.
Thanks. Yeah, this one was pretty popular. People ordered it a lot, and they liked the. I've seen people send it to me hanging in their room as like a motivational poster to themselves, and kind of made me happy that people. I'm happy that this makes people want to like fix something in their life, basically.
And one of the other reasons I like it is a shallow one. Is I really love the old '90s cartoon Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, yep.
And the way and the way Gotham City was depicted, sort of almost abstractly in a way. This artwork really reminds me of like the background cityscape in that cartoon. I really like it.
That Gotham in the original '90s Batman cartoon was a direct reference art style that was pumping into the algorithm.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you fed that in. I really like it.
That little guy, the dark figure in a trench coat in the center there, that did have somewhat vague Batman horns on him. That I had
did it?
So yeah.
Well, I like it. Good job. All right, let's move on to the next image now. We'll talk about it. Now, this one, dying men accumulate remedies, dying societies accumulate laws. That is a beautiful truism. Is that a quote from maybe a famous dead racist or something?
That's the name's there. Nicholas Gomez Davila. He was a Colombian reactionary that I think Panama Hat loves a lot. His quotes are pretty banger. Like he's got some just like really in many ways like the because he wrote in Spanish, a lot of his quotes don't translate to English very well. They get very long, and so this is not a direct quote. I like kind of like shortened it.
Okay.
In order to like anglicize a lot of his quotes, you really have to chop out a lot of the like. A lot of his quotes are leftist meme length, basically.
Oh, okay.
And although he's a reactionary, he's speaking to Latin people, and Latin people have their own style of rhyming, and like their own style of writing, and it's not Anglican. So I kind of reworked it to be more Anglo, like short witticisms that get to the point and make you think. That's a very Anglo style of poetry and rhyme. And so I like the phrase a lot because it is a truism. He's got a lot of ones. I think one of my favorite ones of his is civilization is the summer noise between winters, and that's kind of like a dark thought, but it's a pretty nice one. Panama Hat has done videos on him, I think, if you ever want to like look at more of his quotes. But he's a very smart guy. He was just like English. He was this Colombian / Spanish scholar. I think he might have had Italian family. I forget, but he was there's this very famous photo of him with his granddaughter, happy with his extended family, and you kind of like look at this photo. It's like this guy won life, right? He from way back in like the 1950s and earlier, he knew progress was a lie, and he was like, no, I'm going to focus on having a nice happy family with happy children. And these photos,
that's a real win right there. That's a W that the system can't take away from you.
Yeah, if I find the photo, I'll send it on Twitter. But it's one of these like very precious photos of Let me see if I can find it actually. But yeah, tell me more what you think about it.
Are you sending it right now?
I know, filling the air. You can talk more about it while I look for it.
Sure. I like the look of the guy here because he has sort of this hawkish look to him, and he looks sad as he stares down at what I don't really know exactly. What are these things supposed to be on the desk in front of him?
Well, pills that are red pills that are a joke, but
Okay, I thought that might be the case, but I like this one because it looks like a heavily burdened guy who has clearly some kind of official job. The desk says senator, and he is not someone whom you would think would be like a hero or a cultural leader. He's just the legal system version of a Japanese Harariman that is part of the bureaucratic machine, right? Like that's what you're going for with this, I imagine.
Yep. I sent you on Twitter the photo now if you want to look at it real quick.
Sure.
So like, I just really love Davilia's like family life and like how he just beat the world.
Oh, look at
him
him
with his granddaughter. It's like, yeah, he won. He made happy children, and he made a happy family, extended family. He established a cultural norm. His books are some of the best in Colombian philosophy. He actually wrote books that were basically just like lists of like short, pointed witticisms like that, and so I kind of like used a lot of his for inspiration.
Okay.
They're not translated into English though, so like I know a little bit of Spanish, so I can guess what he's saying, but someone should really translate his works to English properly. Anyway, we can go back to the poster real quick.
Alrighty, give me just a second, and we'll get back to him.
I think someone's asking for the name in the chat. It's Nicolas Gomez Davila. He's just a Panama Hat. It does a lot of good stuff on him.
Here, I'll type it. Yeah. Nicolas Gomez. What's the last name? Spell it for me.
Davila.
Davila. Okay. There we go. Name is in the chat there. And Panama Hat is a friend of ours. He does interesting intellectual stuff on his channel. I've spoken to him several times. I don't remember if Panama Hat was at one of the functions I went to, but I got to meet a lot of the UK guys. He's a UK guy.
Yeah, I met him at the UK event 2 years ago. It was a really nice dude.
I didn't have the money to go to that one, or I would have.
He just is really swaggly.
Yes, he does. Now, this one is a favorite of mine, which is why I changed it to my version, which you've seen.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this one. Go ahead.
People got mad that you did. I'm like, I made these things to be edited for people to use. I don't care.
Yeah, I know. I didn't even know that you were the one behind all of this. I just knew you were sharing them. And then after I made my edit and shared it, you were like, "Hey, I make those," and I was like, "Holy shit, that's awesome."
Yeah, this one was pretty popular. This is probably the second most popular one to the first one that I posted. It's pretty straight to the point. They hated children because they hated you. They don't want more of you.
Yeah, exactly. And
antinatalism is not a word that's quite hit the. It's a word that's existed in our circles, but it hasn't quite entered the mainstream yet. And I do have this like kind of like it's an old Mesopotamian idea that if you can name a devil, you have power over it. Mm-hmm. And so like I think if you make the term antinatalism well known, people will start seeing antinatalism in a lot of the things they consume.
Absolutely. Like that's one of the reasons that I push the words anti-white and anti-whiteism is I want people to recognize the evils being done to us because of our race, so they'll notice them and then hopefully wean themselves off of it, or at least make their children aware of it.
Yeah, and this isn't another poster, but there's this idea that I've been exploring in different ways that if you can learn the measuring stick that the devil uses to build things, you will see everything the devil has built with that metric. And so once you kind of get a familiar, I call it like a lexiconal antibody. Like once you've developed those like awarenesses of what the progressives use in the lexicon, like the words they've invented, the terms they've invented, you kind of develop an antibody against believing anything that you hear using those terms. It's like,
yeah.
and
I've noticed that in myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very healthy to develop an understanding of what terms your enemies use, so you can not work within their framework.
Yeah,
Um,
one of
you,
the
you,
main curatives that we say in the Go Free method is if you legitimize their terminology, you legitimize their ideology. So if
yeah,
you
yeah,
reject their terms, you reject their ideas. And a big part of the Go Free method is creating a framework of language that makes people inoculated against the anti-white mind poison.
yeah. I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick, so feel free to talk about this for a bit.
Oh,
Sorry.
sure, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Um,
Um, while he's stepped away, I'll talk about the changes that I made to this meme. I basically kept it identical. It's just at the bottom. I changed anti-natal to anti-white, and I changed the Restoration Bureau language down there to something else, and I put the nowhiteguilt.org tag down on the bottom right. And that went pretty big on Twitter. And of course, I have my friend Luþemplær here to thank for that. Um, and I hope I said his name correctly. I think it's Luþemplær, like a mix of Templar and Lutheran, because he's Lutheran. So this particular image I like because it shows kids in what looks like, I guess, some kind of weird, either a playground or just kids outside around an old piece of art or something. And I just found it a very interesting, striking image. And what you want most in propaganda is something memorable visually, because then people will conjure that image, and images help people remember things when they're paired with words, sentiments, emotions, that kind of thing. And this one really spoke to me, and it went pretty big on Twitter. People liked it. I think Jason even shared it, the No White Guilt guy. Excuse me. While he has stepped away, I'd like to remind everyone listening, the pinned comment in the YouTube chat is to Entropy. And over on Entropy, you don't even have to send dollars to have your questions and comments be read out on stream to my guest and myself. There's a question widget over on Entropy. So if you don't have the money or you don't want to spend it, you can still interact with me and my guest by putting comments, questions, and links, etc., in the question widget over on the Entropy that is the pinned comment, of course. If you're listening to this on Odyssey, of course, you can post with Libre tokens or with dollars through the Hyper Chat system. And we've already had some things come in on PayPal and Cash App that I'll be getting to at the end of the stream. And of course, the paid chats will take precedence, but I will get to everything that people share in the question widget or in another form of highlighted chat. I don't go digging through the entirety of the live chat. That's just too much work. But we will
I'm
have
back.
community engagement today. And welcome back, Cringe Walker. I just got the shill out of the way while you were gone, so that's good. Moving on, let's talk about this one. This one is very busy. It's very striking. Let's talk about this one.
I consider this one a failure, and I want to redo it. But this is actually a quote from an old Syrian that I knew. He died before the pandemic, but he had a couple of really good like old oral traditions from Syrian Christians, and one of his phrases were "He who calls his fathers fools proves his lineage," which is it's kind of like a riddle almost. Like if you call your ancestors fools, you're kind of fulfilling the term, right? You're a fool. And it's one of my favorite little like. I don't know the term for a witticism that kind of like cycles into itself like that. But I kind of like the vibe. There's a few others like this that he's had, but I wrote them down somewhere. But this is my favorite of his, and it's something I kind of keep in my heart. It's still there. It kind of guides me with how I see people. Like how it's one of the metrics by which I judge someone. Basically, like if you insult the people that raised and taught you, you're probably like, you're calling them all idiots. It's almost like you inherited it.
Yeah. Like, despite the disagreements I have with my boomer family, despite the problems of anti-whiteism and anti-ethnic sentiment that is baked into lots of Christianity these days, I still am thankful to the people I came from. They instilled within me a lot of good values, and they did their best to give me every leg up in life that they could. And I honor them and respect them for that. And I think that unless you come from truly decrepit people, then you probably should at least honor and respect the people who gave of their life and their time and their money to give you a leg up in life. And if you reject and despise the people that raised you, that says a lot about you more than it does them.
Yeah, it's like you kind of reveal a lot of the hatred you have in your heart, almost hatred to the wrong things. Basically, it's like, and the common argument against that is like, well, what if your parents were abusive or this or that, and like like you can learn something from even the worst people, and you can still like respect the knowledge they had while also disagreeing with what they did. Uh, there are some things that like I read a lot of Islamic poetry because even though I think their religion's awful, I think the poetry is rich. I read a lot of like Chinese stories because even though I think the culture is Bugman awful, I think I have a lot to learn from their view of the universe. Like I show Three Body Problem a lot, which is like a Chinese sci-fi. Because it has a lot to say about why democracy doesn't work, even though it's produced by a culture that has a history of mass genocides every couple of decades.
Yeah. Before we move away from this meme, it's a little too busy, and I think that the depiction of blood and a head on a tree probably doesn't work great with this one.
That wasn't meant to be a head on a tree. That's a guy in a white suit, but yeah.
I'm just saying the way it looks, the way it comes off is it looks like a head impaled on a tree.
Exactly. It's a failure. I consider this a failure.
So was this one kind of early in the process, or is this one just one that didn't come out right?
I kind of rushed it. I kind of want to redo it. Eventually, I'm probably going to redo a lot of the ones that I started doing because this is like one of the earlier ones. This is also like 5 or 6 different generated images overlaid over each other. So it's not like an AI made this. I arranged these images in the way that they are.
Right. You use AI the way that it's supposed to be. You use it as a creative tool instead of just making the end product.
Yeah. I kind of like, I'm guilty of like being too lazy and not fixing the hands that AI generates. It's awful at making hands. But yeah, I mean, I try to like collage it in a style that works. Again, like to me, this is in the spirit of John Heartfield. John Heartfield, he took photographs. He didn't paint pictures. He took photographs and he collaged them into meaningful things. So I kind of treat AI as like, instead of a photograph, I'm generating the AI image, or instead of like a magazine, I'm generating a pretend magazine to collage, and then I clip it together into new things.
The only other criticism I would give to this one is fools doesn't need to be in quotation marks. It's not an ironic or a comedic usage of the word fools, so I would drop the quotes on that one. But we can move on from this image, and we'll move to this one. I like this one.
Yeah, this one was popular.
Let's talk about this one.
So, like, E in words derived from, I think, Greek or Latin, E is like it's like anti, it's like it's undo. So equality does etymologically mean the elimination of quality. That's just what the word means.
Yep.
So like in order to have equality, you have to by necessity destroy quality, because quality is unequal to what isn't quality. And I wanted to point that out in terms of like, I think I made this during one of the, occasionally like goy slop and seed oil memes will pop up and throughout the timeline. Like they go in waves, come and goes.
Goy slop is still one of my favorite words to come out of this entire movement. I love the word goy slop. It's so funny.
I pumped that really hard. I'm partially responsible for that because that was a like an old boys Catholic meme word that you'd see on like Urban Dictionary for a few years before it became
I first learned goy slop from 4chan in like 2007 or something. It's been around for a while.
And I only learned about it like a year or so ago, and I was like, I want to make this word popular. I need this. I need this word to be popular.
It's really funny. It's like, I need to go to McDonald's to get my $1 menu goy slop today.
Yeah, and like I said, like now that demon is named, you can't unnotice it in the food you eat.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
This is the art of propaganda is naming a demon so that you see it everywhere it left its print, right? Like once you have its name, you see everywhere it's signed.
Exactly. I like the words on this one. The old regime could only achieve equality by crippling your biology, reveal their monstrosity by restoring your physiognomy.
Yeah, it was a very long rhyming thing. I think it's a little like gimmicky, but people liked it.
I like it, and it's not too long because the top line is all that really matters. But people that want to pay closer attention and actually look into it and care, they will get a lot from those two lines. And I do appreciate the rhyme, because I do appreciate things like verse and poetry and things. But no, I really like that, because when you think about equality, it is the erasure of quality. It's the erasure of exception. And people that are capable of leading movements and being kings and being great warriors and leaders of men, they are not normal. They are exceptional. And they physically, biologically have to cripple that in us. That's, in my opinion, that's the point, I think, of the over-medicated, poisonous goy slop society that we live in, is that is the system working to eliminate the possibility of a Caesar, or the possibility of any champion that rises up among the people. I think that it is not an accident. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, par for the course. If everybody's a fat balloon, no one can take up any challenges, right? And I have some thoughts about, like, is that necessarily people becoming more gluttonous, or is that because they're feeding a different diet that's making people gluttonous? There's a lot of people in, I guess, Puritan traditions that think, if the pastor's fat, he's ineligible because he's suffering from gluttony, the sin.
Yeah.
And I lean that way, but I'm also like, well, at the same time, like, they've completely messed up your diet so that if you eat a normal amount of food that they serve you, you get like obese just by proxy of eating a normal amount. You actually have to
exactly. Yeah.
You have to borderline fast yourself, be in a constant fast to not get fat with the food that they serve you.
Yeah.
So I've seen this. I famously I have a very wide weight range. I'll gain and lose 40 pounds throughout the year. Throughout the year I'll be either like 210 pounds or 250 pounds. I bounce around a lot because I either go
I'm
really
like that too, actually.
Yeah.
Luþemplær, I need to say your name correctly. I'm like that too. Like during the winter months when my outside activity slows, I almost always put on 15 or 20 pounds, and then I shed it again in the spring. That's just how I've always been.
Yeah. And so if I actually want to keep the weight off, I've done tests of this. Like if I eat one meal a day for like a week, I don't lose weight. I stay at the same. So it's like, okay, there's something wrong with the diet then.
Yeah, I noticed that a long ago, because I was like, why am I fat and feel bad all the time? And it was because I was basically living off of bad food. I was buying box frozen goods, low quality. I was always in a hectic rush to get to work and to go visit people and try to. So I was eating on the go, having a sandwich here, a salad there, a Subway here, Arby's, McDonald's. And I was like, you know what? Maybe all of this food is actually not food. Maybe this is just garbage. And when I moved away from that eating habit, I lost like 30 pounds. I got better energy. I slept better. My hair and nails healthier. And I was like, wow, I really was just eating garbage.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, goy slop's a fun word for this, but we also kind of need a word for like just, I don't know, like that fact, that nature of something. It needs a name for it. But what the poster is basically saying, like, like the background's a bunch of fat people that aren't doing exercise, and the front ground is like brilliant, blonde Aryan guy or something. But
yeah,
he's like,
looks like, and the pose, like the ends of his feet are elongated and pointed, and that is the way that they drew feet of superheroes wearing spandex costumes. They would just make a little like knife point for their feet. And to me, this looks like some kind of beautiful Aryan superhero flying through the air over the fat mongrels.
Yeah. They haven't banned the word Aryan yet in the algorithm, so you can have some fun with it for now.
That word's not an ugly word to me. I usually avoid it to not step on landmines in other people's heads. But to me, it's a good word. I like the word Aryan.
Yeah. I prefer it as a term for just like the migratory people that conquered Europe. There's like the older European stock of like the Celtics, and then like the Germanics are the migratory people that came from the steppes, and then the Slavs are like a cousin people that didn't leave the steppes. So I think
the Aryan spirit is what gives us the eternal Anglo.
Yeah. It is a fun term to play with. Later on there'll be a poster I posted, but to some degree this is biblical, because when Noah's three sons left the ark, they received blessings and curses, and Japheth, the traditional ancestor of white people, he basically said, like, as long as you stay with your brother's tent, you'll basically rule over your brothers. And so you can translate that as, like, the Aryans will rule the world as long as they go to church.
What a good sentiment that is. If only we could make churches not pause to garbage, and we're working hard to do that. All right, let's move on. This next one is fun. It reminds me of They Live.
Yeah. There were a few inspirations for this. I think Souther did some kind of Coomer meme posting, Souther's Lament, and I was like, I should make a poster about Coomers, and because I've made several thumbnails for Souther's videos that involve like what he calls the Coomer right, like people like Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
And so
I don't consider Tate adjacent to us at all.
Yeah.
He is. I don't support this Tate character.
I don't know enough about him to know anything about him. He rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, no, I know little about him, but from what little I've been able to glean, I don't think I would like him. So I don't mind making that statement.
Yeah. Oh, someone said in your chat, Japheth sells the father of Asians. I can test that, but that's for another time. Yeah. So the Coomer meme here is like, if you the algorithms have a lot of heavy bans on anything graphic, but if you look closer at those circular images, they're kind of like naughty images. I managed to trick the AI into doing vaguely naughty images. So it's like, it says hot babes and there's like stuff on there. But
I like the text on this. The text up at the top, for those who can't see it on the screen, it says, "Beware the Coomer. Since the fall of the old regime, deprived minds." Is that supposed to be depraved?
Yeah, depraved. Oops.
Depraved minds have become desperate for their degenerate reading material. If anyone offered you the old regime filth, report it immediately. Don't end up like this guy. And it shows a guy running away from concerned citizens with his box or book of hot babes, saying, "I need it, I need it, I need it."
Yeah, he's like a scrawny guy. He's got like, one arm's more muscular than the other one, right? Like the typical
I saw that. Yeah.
There's a lot of memes in here, and so it's just this is just like a fun one. Like occasionally I just do these like proper meme worthy images that aren't like serious, but like it is somewhat serious, but it's kind of like don't be this guy, don't be this desperate like Coomer.
Yeah, and I like how even though it's sort of tongue in cheek with the Stalin era conformity, even though that's kind of tongue in cheek, I do think that it sends a good message of we need to be socially, culturally unified against the cancer that damages us all. And I think that is a good, strong message, because a message of unity is a healthy one if it's not state conformity for state power. If it's cultural, moral unity against things that are bad for you, then I think that unity in this message is actually strong and works for us. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, people conforming. It's like there's a resisting identity that maintains its traditions, and then there's the like lazy identity that just goes with all of its passions. And really, like, before you have a civilization, you need an identity, and an identity that fails to build up never develops a civilization. An identity that just gives into its passions tends to just like degenerate back to the bestial form.
Yes.
And so there's a lot to learn in terms of like how do you actually build an identity? Well, first you need a resistance to what isn't your identity. If you're just goobly goop like anything, then you're not really an identity. You're just like a collection of memes. Right. A LARPer. I have this phrase. I'm trying to develop it, but there's a phrase I'm starting to use. A nation without an ethnos is a religion, and a religion without elders is a LARP. And I think that's something that like I'm trying to like develop it more in a rhymey way. But like once a nation loses its ethnos, it's just an ideology that is looking to compete with religion, basically.
Yeah, and I think that is I think why we've sort of stumbled into this godless religion of technocratic Brahmin that want everyone just to be an integer in their globalist equation, because we don't have an ethnos, we don't have whether it's binding under God to create Christendom, whether it's some kind of healthy, functional, cultural ethnos. We don't have anything like that anymore. And that's one of the reasons why I've gotten on board with the white well-being community is they look at, through a racial lens, one of the primary pillars that's been destroyed in America, which is the WASP Anglo-Saxon Christian founding stock, that our identity is actively being chiseled and stripped from us along that line of ethnos. And instead of just naming the J or talking about immigrants or replacing us, white genocide, blah, 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 we don't think that is going to be enough, because you have to have positivity, a positive vision, and healthy culture before you can have a healthy ethnos and an identities. And that's why I think you are naturally sympathetic to the message of this community, is you seem to preach the exact same things.
Yeah, I mean, like, my background is more Irish and Semitic Slav groups of mystery meat from the East, but it's still I kind of operate on the assumption that everyone deserves a homeland. And there's this line I read once. I really wish I remembered where it was, but it basically is like the end of a bloodline is a terrible thing. And it is an ancient text. It's something tangential to like apocryphal biblical text, but like it's like it's a lamentation of the end of a bloodline, or the end of a lineage, and how this is like a sign of a curse from God, or the operations of the devil. And even if I'm like not really, like, I'm not Anglo, but I'm like why are you trying to rob these people's like heritage? Like it seems more like well, I mean, I from a biblical perspective, I know why. It's because here's a strong Christian people, let's destroy them. And it's just like annoying. It's
especially because those Anglo white people have made the great civilization that we live in the ashes of.
Yeah. It's like, and of course, like once that destruction started, of course you've started seeing massive decay. There's a druid, a pagan druid I like to read. John Michael Greer. Have you heard of him?
I've heard the name, but I couldn't say who it is. But I do remember that name bouncing around in the streams and communities we're in.
Yeah, he developed the theory of catabolic collapse, where things don't outright collapse; they kind of tend to consolidate on the way down, and have they appear to be healing and getting stronger again, but in reality they're just consolidating their losses. He had a phrase, because like he writes a lot about how the ethnos of America is increasingly one of ideology rather than an ethnic identity, and he basically postulates that at some point these urban Anglo-Saxon people, progressives, were like, well, we're going to make our identity progress now instead of our culture, and so their ethnicity is progress. And then he says, like, but the thing is, you're assuming progress goes on forever. You could always breed more ethnicity. You can't breed more progress necessarily. There may be a limit. And so he has this quote where it's visit the grave that Nietzsche built for God, and you might hear the gravediggers burying progress too. It's a great quote.
Oh wow, that's a good quote. Yeah.
And so John Michael Greer has a lot of like famous like phrases, but he kind of identifies the 1960s and 70s as the last catabolic phase, where in which several cities were abandoned, a large part of the country was abandoned, and then America kind of consolidated itself to a few city states and trade ports. And that became like the actual vitality of the American empire, where everything else was kind of left to like rot. And he postulates that, he postulated back in 2008 that that was probably meant to be the next phase of catabolic collapse, but they like kind of like magicked away the debt or kicked it down the can. And so now he says like, well, at some point in the next decade, you're probably going to have that magical wished away catabolic collapse return. And he postulates that like at that point you're going to see like large amounts of America outright abandoned, and the peripheral of America is already being abandoned. Like we left Afghanistan, and you're starting to see behaviors of American empire that is increasingly authoritarian rather than egalitarian
and desperate.
So bombing your allies' oil pipelines with Germany, like threatening them. It's like these are not the behaviors.
It was natural gas, not oil. But I take
yeah. Like we bombed an ally to force them to conform to our policies, which is it's not something you do.
Yeah, it's not a sign of being a healthy empire. No, it's
Yeah, so I can imagine that the next phase of catabolic collapse is probably going to hit a lot of the bubbles that we see, ranging from tech and housing to other things. So I don't know what that will look like, but a little bit worrying. We could go to the next poster now.
Well, speaking of, we were just talking about lineage and bloodlines and ethnos. I like this image a lot. This is a beautiful image that shows different expressions of our people, you could say,
Yeah,
and I think this is wise because Western civilization wasn't just Greek, it wasn't just Italian, it wasn't just French, it wasn't just German, it wasn't just Anglo. It was all of us. It was all of the great inspired men. And yes, we did war on each other, but men test their mettle together, and the strongest or the most cunning rise to the top. And I think that we need to acknowledge the many different expressions of ethnicity, religion, and tactics that the people who shaped our civilization had, and realize we are their progeny and their spirit lives in us. And this is a good image. So why don't you talk about this one and why you made the choices you did for it?
yeah, and it's a bit of throw a bone to the pagans a bit, but yeah, I at this point I was this came after I made a bunch of memes about like there's a lot of overlap between the sons of Noah and the names of pagan gods. Like Japheth is also the name of a titan in the Greek mythology, and Japheth may be somewhat related to the term Despetar, the kind of like Indo-European sky god. Both of Japheth means God will expand, and Despetar means like expansion, sky expanse kind of father god. So there's some like overlap with meanings, and you can, if you look hard enough, you see it. And so I kind of want to do something which was like, well, I mean, like I'm not going to agree that the pagan gods were actual gods, but I'm going to like let your ancestors be people that lived and did great things. I also think that there's a lot of value, if you view a lot of these pagan gods as just ancient kings that did great deeds, it becomes a lot more tangible to you to repeat those things. They're
Yes.
not like these like impossible to perfectly, they're not these forms that you can't perfectively what's the term I'm looking for, that they're not like like Plato has ideal geometry that you can never get quite the perfect square.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like the pagan gods aren't these like, they're not platonic geometries that you can never acquire. There are ancient kings that did great things that men wrote stories about because they were valorous and did things. Yeah. I view all pagan gods as kings, and maybe angels and demons, but probably kings, men that did great deeds that were deified later on.
Yeah.
And they were great. Even the Bible says this, like the Nephilim were the great men of old. They did great deeds and are remembered appropriately for them.
Yeah, and I think that fits in fine with what we're trying to build going forward. Is I've met a lot of people who are Asatru or some kind of pagan that are not paused, hypersexualized retards. Like there are a lot of pagans I've met who I think have good character and speak wisdom and truth and want the kind of future that we want. So I would like to have some kind of peace with them. And the reason why I say that, I know it might sound derogatory, but any expression of paganism, of European paganism, by far is the minority and has no cultural influential power at all, like various Christian institutions do. So if we can get people that are of like mind and of like vision in all religious camps or spiritual camps working towards a similar goal, I think that is worth unity and putting aside differences and not doing the silly pagan versus Christian name calling, which I try to avoid.
Yeah, I'm bad at avoiding it. I have my fun, but at the same time, I'm like, like you shouldn't abandon the stories that your fathers taught you. Even if I view them as like exaggerations, like there probably was a man named Thor who fought a great serpent and did great deeds. You can find these stories across the Indo-European tradition.
And personally, as much as Christianity has meant to my life and how I was raised, I personally have been more inspired by Aragorn and Odysseus than Jesus of Nazareth. So I think that finding inspiration and being driven to do great things and to be a great person, I don't think that you should demonize the pagan mythologies and the non-Christian mythologies, because even someone like myself, who I call myself a Christian. I practice Christianity. I am very inspired by these great legends, and I think that these are things that should be nurtured, remembered, and not vilified.
There's also like the argument that these debates that are held between the stories of pagan myth and Christian stories, that's somewhat a modern divide. If you go back in time, you'll find like early Christians reading Gilgamesh and saying, "Oh yeah, this guy is Nimrod," or like, this guy was like, they don't view them as outside of their religion. Ancient people viewed these stories as part of a cultural continuum that some people deified and some people read as like good stories to remember. The idea that like they were like, what is it like, the idea that they were competing religions is a bit later on. They were more competing origin myths that it's hard to say. Like there's a good example like Justin Martyr who dunked on Zeus a lot. Like a lot of his writing is like calling out Zeus for being a rapist, but he doesn't say that the guy didn't exist. He says like, that this was like an ancient king who had sexual sins. he was pretty eager to sleep around. And a lot of the, like I said, like a lot of the sons of Noah are explicitly using the names of pagan gods, and this is like a kind of common. It's not only the Jews that did this; the Christians did this, and a lot of Syriacs, like mystics, did this. Front ranging from Samaritans did this to some extent. Egyptians, Babylonians were pretty big on this. They would look at the other gods and say that is the king of the neighboring city state, right? That he was a king, and then he got deified by his people. So again, that's why Japheth, the son of Noah, is also a titan in the Greek mythology. Same name, Japheth. Japheth, and he's also Japheth is also something of a it might be related to Jupiter, but I don't know for sure. I doubt it.
Okay.
And if you go a little bit further, that it becomes a lot more obvious. So the star traditions, a lot of these stories, like with the Jupiter, the planet being like the king, the sky god, and the moon and the constellations, you kind of start realizing that these things have a common origin. So for example, I think every 12 years Jupiter will spend 12 months in Virgo and then head to the Serpents, which is basically like the biblical proto-evangelium, like the king born of a virgin will slay the serpent.
Interesting. I'm not familiar enough with the mythology of either of what you're talking about to know any of that.
Yeah, this is like very deep lore stuff. There's a common tendency for a lot of people to like view the arguments that they're having as having always existed and not being a like kind of artificially invented divide. The Stoics did this too, where the Stoics viewed the Greek and Roman gods as manifestations of divine virtue rather than actual gods. They kind of viewed like an original unknown god. Paul references this as like choosing individuals to be patriarchs and expressing a virtue of it. This kind of gets kind of mystic gobbledygook sometimes, but essentially what I'm saying is like, I made this art as a kind of like as a reference that like if you abandon the belief that these characters are actual gods and view them as ancient men, part of your bloodline and part of your heritage, they're a lot cooler. They're a lot more fun to learn from. Like, it's not this like unable to achieve story of a more than human person. It's a human that did a great deed that you could do also.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see why you'd say that.
Some people might apply that to Jesus, and of course, like I'm Christian. I think Jesus was fully God and fully human. So like his human actions are still done as a human, but his godly actions are done as a god, as the god. And so
yeah, I understand that distinction. Yeah, I got that from my Christian upbringing.
Yeah, so I always encourage people within the Greek tradition. I think it's Greek tradition. There's the Panchaea mythos cycle. This is like a bit of it was a Greek attempt to reinterpret the gods as ancient kings, which Plato and Socrates did somewhat. If you read Plato's Republic, he's often, backhanded smacking polytheism and saying that there's only one god, but never directly saying it because they've gotten killed in the city. You couldn't say there were you couldn't say the gods are fake. You would just say, Plato and Socrates tended to just make these offhand comments that, like, mentioning Zeus as a king rather than a god, and trying to normalize it. This comes from a Panchaea mythos. Panchaea is the like ancient hypothetical homeland of Olympus, basically. Where Panchaea is doesn't matter. People have tried to be autistic about it and name where it was. It doesn't matter. Panchaea is the name for a hypothetical ancient kingdom that the Olympian gods ruled over as men. And part of the Panchaea mythos is that if you go to Panchaea, you'll find the gravestones of Zeus and all the other gods. They were men that died, and their tombs are still there.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Anyway, we're on too long about this topic.
Yeah. Let's move on. That was a fun conversation. Let's move on. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah.
I like this one because of the faces in the background.
Yeah, all those faces are AI generated. It's funny how if you ask the AI to generate an angry progressive woman, it gets a certain type. There's a certain physique the AI notices.
Are you saying that physiognomy is rarely wrong?
Yeah, it's funny that the AI it notices patterns. It's a pattern recognizing tool, and so if you ask it for a progressive like scooching woman, there's a physiognomy of that it has noticed and documented and hasn't been corrected by the creators yet. But yeah, the text, like they celebrate abortion as a substitute for a desire to have you executed. It's a bit of a rhyme, a half rhyme. It doesn't perfectly rhyme, but it's whatever you see progressives celebrating abortion as a human virtue, you should be aware that what they're doing is they're imagining killing you. The fetus is a substitute. It's a substitute for wanting to kill you. They can't kill you legally, so they'll kill your offspring.
Yeah. And in my opinion, that's a big part of the push behind the transgenderism as well, is they not only do they get to desecrate the natural order of things, something as basic as sex, but at the same time, it's a destruction of the possibility of life by mutilating genitals and making people infertile or sterile. And I think that goes along with the same kind of evil of the people who push abortion and celebrate it.
Yeah, and they tend to, if you look at the statistics, I think I might have this wrong, but I think Black women might get the most number of a large number of Black women have had abortions, but of the white women who have had abortions, they're the highest leading for repeat abortions. It's kind of weird. Like white women have like on average a Black woman has a single abortion. On average, a white woman has like 3 abortions. And so even though white women have fewer, even though per white woman, the number of white women having abortions is lower than Black women, the number of abortions of the women who have abortions who are white, they tend to have multiple ones.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making it clear, but it's sad because like Black people tend to have their kids. White women tend to kill their kids. It's a trend that's really sickening and should be fixed.
I agree. And I think that this type of propaganda is good for that.
Yeah, it's also... Sorry,
go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue.
No, it's not really related to the poster, but, like a lot of times the reason women are pushed to have an abortion is kind of nonsensical. What about your career? Yeah, but most people don't have any successful careers. They just become button pushers. So, what about your savings? Most people don't have significant savings. What are you going to spend it on when you're old and alone? A lot of the arguments for allowing abortion, outside health risks. Okay, fine, I understand health risks happen, but that's like 2% of abortions. 98% of abortions, 98% of abortions are completely elective, and just because of a fear of your financial well-being, that is usually a myth. Listen, if the economy crashes, you're going to get fucked either way. Yeah.
All right. Moving on then. We have a few more to look at here before we wrap things up. Mind the slope. It's slippery out there. The old regime called this a logical fallacy. The Bureau calls it your working faculties. Now, this speaks to me as a full-time noticer. I've been a noticer for quite some time. And if there is one thing I've noticed, is that the slippery slope has been proven correct every step of the way the last 20 years.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is inspired by a post by Prudentialist. I forget what it was, but I saw something he said. I was like, oh, I'm making a poster about that. And so he liked it. He shared it around, and I wanted to commemorate it. It's like all these like there's a reason why the guy walking down the slope is this hunchback balding man, while the other ones aren't. But
yeah.
there's a certain posture.
Again, it's almost like physiognomy matters.
Yeah, a lot of these have I take a sensitivity to physiognomy in these if I can.
I appreciate that. I like that. Let's move on then. This one I like. It reminds me of 60s and 70s art pieces. Were you inspired by a particular piece or a particular artist for this one?
Once again, John Hartfield. The quote comes from a Norse saying in the Eddas. I think it was
I have
Odin.
the Young Edda and another of the Eddas here, because whenever I wanted to look into Asatru, I got some of their books, and I have it over there. I haven't fully read it yet, though.
Yeah, I think Odin said this, but like no weary mind can stand against his time. It's a nice poem. I really like it. It's like it's a wise saying.
I see the little Twitter bird in there.
Yeah, it has a lot of little gimmicks. I did Photoshop a lot of those things individually. It's not just a purely AI generated image. I went deep dive in there. There's actually a previous poster in there if you look hard enough, but I didn't put the main poster in the timeline here. It's a simple phrase like you're not gonna win against a violent regime if your head is like cluttered with all these fears and panics and distractions. Right. Like you just can't do it. Like there's another poster I made where not every drug is chemical. Electronic drugs are a thing.
Right, like pornography is a good example, or MMOs.
Yeah.
A lot of people of my age category grew up with the explosion of both MMOs and internet pornography. And my husband had an internet porn problem many, many years ago when he was a young man, because it was just so available, and all of his young teenage friends at the time talked about it, and they shared porn links and talked about porn all the time. And that was more detrimental to him than any drug or antidepressant or anything. And it took him years to get over that. And I'm very glad that he did.
Yeah, it's there's this idea that there's a concept in science. It's called a prodrug, and that what a prodrug is, if you can't get someone to have a drug, or if they're like allergic to the drug or something, or if in some cases the drug is illegal, a prodrug decays into the drug you want in the body, and so it kind of bypasses it. Usually a prodrug is a chemical, so you put the chemical in the body. The chemical is legal, but it decays into an illegal substance in your body. It's a trick.
That's bizarre. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, prodrugs are a good way to get around a lot of regulation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a chemical decaying into another chemical. It can also be like you said, like porn. A light can induce the production of chemicals in the brain that are drugs.
Yeah.
Dopamine.
And like MMOs and social media get your brain addicted to dopamine hits.
Exactly, and so in many ways, you if you ever wanted to become anything, you usually have to fast from food and joys and pleasures for a period of time. Not because of the suffering makes you stronger or anything, it can, but it's also because it makes you more focused and kind of collapses the neurons that are distracted. Everything you do in a pattern will cause a part of your neurological network to develop like a cycle in your brain to to encourage the cycle you've gotten stuck into. It's a self-repeating, like self-reinforcing problem. Yeah. So you can't just turn off and switch from a problem you have. You have to like go through the weeks of getting your neurons to detach from the cycle and reattach to new cycles. People don't have patience anymore, and so that's a big problem why people get stuck in the cycles. Yeah. These things, developing a new neurological cycle can take upwards of 6 months, and so it takes time.
One of the things that this speaks to me about is I had to wean myself off of content creation. I used to consume dozens of hours of content a week. I was always listening to, whether it was Millennial Woes and catching up on the latest Millennial, whether it was listening to Black Pilled or the Jolly Heretic, or any of the hundreds of quality content creators that are out there. I just stayed jacked in all the time for years. This was between like 2014 and 2018. Mm-hmm. And I had to wean myself off of that because it was giving my brain this constant need for people talking about the black pilling dystopia that we live in. And I realized around 2019 that this is entirely unhealthy to my mental well-being, and it's sabotaging my productivity. And so that's why in the last few years I have dramatically cut out most of the internet content. Like, I still like people like Black Pilled or Black Pigeon Speaks or Professor Dutton over at the Jolly Heretic. I still like these guys and they make great stuff. The same with Adam over at No More News that documents all the evil Jewish conspiracy stuff. Like, these guys do good work. It's just, if I stay plugged in listening to this stuff around the clock, it not only does it rob me of productivity, it keeps me in a dark, dismal mindset all the time, and that's just miserable for the people in my life. So I had to unplug from all of that, even though they were allied people in this struggle. I had to sort of detox from all of that and focus my mind on the more positive, real things I could influence directly in life.
Yeah, it's and some meditative techniques understand this but don't go all the way. So, like, a good example is Buddhism, which focuses on emptying the self. But the problem with Buddhism is that it doesn't tell you to fill the self with anything. And so oftentimes you get filled with like, you'll have, with a lot of Buddhists, you'll have people like have an initial period of clarity of thought and purity, but then because they didn't fill your head with anything better, they usually fall into something kind of degenerate afterwards.
I see. I was not familiar with this phenomenon.
Yeah. There's a Tabala Rasa technique where the goal is to become a Tabala Rasa. Like, anything that you weren't born with psychologically, you should get rid of. But
yeah, I'm familiar with the basics of the empty mind or void mind technique. I understand that, but I didn't know about the phenomenon of many of those people getting involved in degenerate things because they sort of blank slated themselves into being reprogrammed by propaganda or something.
Exactly. A good example of that is, like, every high school white girl was into like Buddhist meditation techniques like 10 years ago. 10 years later, they're all full of astrology and drugs and cold burning. But anyway, not everyone, but like a lot of them did end up filling themselves with like, oh, it's foreign, it must be better than what I used to. It's annoying, but it happens. If you're gonna go through the process of blanking your emptying your mind, just be aware. Find something to fill it with, or you're gonna eventually like get filled with something propagandized from the regime.
Gotcha. Good message. Let's move on. This one's funny. I like this one.
Yeah, another one inspired by Prudentialist.
Prudentialist is good people. I like Matthew. He's a good guy. Your future steak is smarter than a journo snowflake.
Yeah, another rhyme. Good rhyme.
It's good. I like it because you've got this dude in sunglasses with his little latte or whatever. It's what is this? Tell me about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a journalist. Like, yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought.
New Jack Times. That's a reference to the movie New Jack City. But
I thought that might be the case. I was going to bring that up. Good job with that one.
Also a really good movie. Yeah. So yeah, the cow is like, look at me here with this R turd. There's a little text that I think explains it, right? Like the pens of the old regime skitter and scatter. Their stillness is replaced with your laughter. I forget what I wrote there, but yeah, it was a quick gimmick. Prude said something about what steak and veganism. I forget what Prude wrote, but I turned it into a rhyme and it was really good. It was a good one. McDonald's colors somewhat on purpose, but not necessarily.
Cool. Now, this one definitely has old Soviet style imagery to it. Tell one. For those that are just listening on the podcast, it's a fist on a mostly blank, shadowy background. It's a raised fist, the communist fist, and it says, "Rootlessness precedes ruthlessness. The old regime atomized families into rootless hordes. If you find old regime atomizers, report them."
Yeah. It's it is explicitly like kind of a looking fist, but it's like been replaced with like it's supposed to look amputated, but it's also like tree roots that are like
the roots of a tree. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a term like people become savages when they don't have a community. Yeah, it's just a tendency. I know a lot of people in this area might talk about like genetics, and genetics have a big thing to do with it. But like you can simulate genetics with behavior, and unfortunately, large parts of the country that were previously like happy Anglo families are now ruthless hordes, like in Georgia and Seattle, not Georgia, Atlanta and Seattle, where like these like young white liberals that are detached from their family and traditions have become these like ruthless hordes, basically.
The hordes of Dr. Sutton's spiteful mutants.
Yeah, they're spiteful mutants. Spiteful mutants is a great term for them because they're not just mutants. They're not just mutants genetically. They're mutants
spiritually, mentally,
spiritually. How they behave, behaviorally mutants. They're divergent from the traditional family, and so they just become these easily controllable hordes that you can stick on any of your political enemies.
One of the words we use in white well-being a lot is deracinated or deracination. That means removing the roots or removing by the root or becoming rootless. And one of the problems with trying to heal what's been done to us is the deracination process started many generations ago. And everyone that listens to this is familiar with the denazification program and what was done to the Germans around the mid-century. But that never stopped. It was exported to all of the West. The focus of annulment, and annulment, of course, means the removal of or the nullification of stuff. The annulment of having a rooted, deep cultural community that you're part of, that is what every power-mongering managerial body wants, whether it be whatever your brand of favorite state might be, whether it's a liberal democracy or national socialism or whatever it is. People that are evil and only want control, they don't like well-rooted, well-grounded people because, like we mentioned earlier in the stream, that is an attack vector to making people more easily controlled, is atomizing them and tearing them out by the root. And so how do you restore that? How do you get the roots again? Well, you can't, because since it was generations ago, the tree that those roots went to is already dead. We have to plant new trees and create new roots for what comes next. So that's the whole push behind what I do, is planting seeds and growing roots for whatever our next cultural thing is.
Yeah, and it didn't start in the mid-century. You can trace this all the way back to like the Union in the Civil War, bringing in large number of Irishmen detached from their families and like sticking them to the South. Like these completely rootless Irishmen who had no loyalties to American heritage, and they their homeland had been destroyed by the British during the colonial era because it was starved to death, and so like they're basically just these like rootless hordes that America imported to fight for them, and of course sent them down south to burn down the whole South. So like why did these soldiers have no problem burning down half their own country? Because they weren't American. they came from Ireland.
Also they didn't, to go along with it, they were ruthless because they were rootless.
Yeah. It's not. This happens a lot in history too. It's not. America isn't the first one to do this, but like America did it.
Well, you got Chechens now that are being used the same way.
Yeah. It's an industrial scale that America can do it at, because we got it right the first time we tried it in the South. Bring over 200,000 Irishmen detached and send them to burn down half the country that they don't know about. Done as can be. And then send them into the factories and work them to death after that in an industrial revolution. But
that's basically how that went.
Yeah, and this is a typical pattern of the American regime, where bring in a bunch of rootless people, have them do a terrible deed, and then work them to death in the factories until they're no longer a problem. It's kind of tragic. Eventually we stopped doing it in America and started doing it in other places of the world.
But it's still evil regardless.
Yeah. Let's
talk about this one.
Yeah, this was another popular one that I've seen this one getting shit around by liberals on Twitter. Progressives. I don't like using the term liberal anymore. Progressives on Twitter. And I kind of like snooped in, so I'm like arguing about it, and and what it could mean. I
I
think
like the egg carton with the missing egg. That's pretty good.
I know. Well, that's kind of a bad image because it's actually just one egg left in the carton, but because people associate brown eggs, it looks like it's one missing egg rather than just one egg left.
Oh, so the brown parts are not eggs; they're empty sockets, and the white is
Yeah.
the one egg left. Okay,
Yeah,
I see it.
yeah.
I see it. Okay.
It didn't get noticed by most people.
Unfortunately, I like farm fresh eggs, so I'm used to the darker eggs. Yeah.
Exactly. That's my urbanite nature showing up. But yeah, this one did I did a reverse Google search on it to find where it was being shared on Twitter by progressives. I just kind of snooped in on them and see what they were arguing about. I think the funniest thing is that they weren't sure if it was right wing or left wing, and that's kind of a goal of mine.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, because that's what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually like the fact that people don't know if these are left or right wing because they're just anti whatever was ruling us.
Well, you know me personally, and you know that I don't ascribe to leftism or rightism. I think that the left-right divide is cancer, and the people that started, I mean, exactly, like the Francophile Jacobites that started this nonsense. They're the enemy group. They are directly the lineage of the problem that we have, and I don't like the left-right divide. I care about what works for my people, my ethnicity, my culture, and that's what I care about. And that's not left-wing or right-wing. I want what's best for white people, Appalachians, Southerners, etc. And I don't really care about the left-right divide. And I feel like people who want us to care about that want us to be assigned a box that they can control and pit against the others.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, so this post was kind of like to that degree with like, what do quote unquote liberated women actually do with their day? It's like, work 8 hours, lose another egg, drink and party and take drugs. It's like, it's not, go travel. I didn't put a go traveling one, and then a little bit of sleep to mend the way. It's not really a liberated life. It's more like congratulations, you're just another agent in the machine. I guess that's freedom. I am happy.
That's one of the reasons I like Aiden Paladin. She's made a lot of good deep dive videos about why this is the lies told to women lead to their misery. It's a very dark subject. Yeah,
and unspoken, but I do notice a lot of Zoomer women look at these like decrepit mid-30s like millennial women and how awful they are, and just like they're running into traditional relationships because they don't want that. And this is kind of one of the tragedies of being stuck in a cycle where you don't notice how divergent you are from normalcy. Many of these like quote unquote cat ladies in their mid-30s, they don't think they're abnormal and they don't notice they're abnormal. But a lot of Zoomer women look at them and like, what the fuck is wrong with these people?
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move on for sake of time because we're getting short on time here.
Sorry.
Oh no! Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. No, this I slotted 2 hours for this because I wanted to give this a full attention. Let's see. We have a whole lot more to get through here.
Yeah. The next one was a biblical one, actually. The white people one.
Let's do this one then. Let's talk about this one. Why did you make this one? Tell me about it.
Well, this is I think it was a month ago, but there were a lot of arguments about is Christianity just a Jewish religion or is it something else? And so I pointed out that the quote unquote Jewish parts of the Bible are pretty much just
the Abrahamic stuff.
Well, not even Abraham. Like Judaism proper is pretty much just Moses's temple religion. There's a lot of weird things there that you wouldn't expect to find in a book supposedly for only Semitic people. Like there's that line in Genesis, in the sun there, in the black sun there. there's a quote from Genesis.
That's dangerously based, but we're gonna leave that one alone for now.
Yeah. Well, the text says atomization kills. Restore your rooting to receive Christ's instituting. It's referencing this line in Genesis where, again, I think I mentioned earlier, Noah blesses white people. As long as you worship the God of Shem, you'll be given dominion over Shem and others, your brothers, basically. It's that line in the Bible where like may Yahweh expand the territory of Japheth, may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And this is there's some cultural baggage there, but essentially what it means to dwell in the tent of someone, it means to submit to their house gods. And so what's saying there is like, submit to the God of Shem, that's like the Abrahamic God, and you'll rule over Canaan. Canaan is, so it's like somebody in your chat mentioned Japheth is the father of Asians. Yes and no. Canaan is the father of essentially the many peoples outside of the covenant. This is why Canaan was cursed to be a servant to to Shem, but or Japheth actually. And so it's this really interesting part of the Bible where it says, "Hey, Europeans, you're destined to rule the world." And of course, this was written before the Roman Empire, before the Greek Empire. There was no reason to assume this would be true, but the Bible
But it
says, like,
is.
yeah, like the Bible says, if you obey Yahweh, you will rule over the Jews and the foreigners. You'll rule over them. You'll be the boss man.
Yeah, this is a popular thing that comes up because in the pro-white circles that I'm in, there's of course a lot of negativity around Christianity due to its Jewish connection. But when I look at the major religions of the world, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, all the variations thereof, Christianity, especially Protestantism, stands out to me as an almost entirely European creation. And I don't think that we would have a religion that is completely of another people's. Like over the last 2,000 years, whatever we have as Christianity, in a lot of ways, it has been created by us to serve us. And I know that some Christians believe in things that I don't, and there might be some contention there. But I do think that we need to acknowledge the practices around church, family. Some of these are good things that are, in my opinion, biospiritual creations of Western kind, of white people. They're not just Semitic layovers. I think that our religious structures are very much a creation of ours. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and like, what is Judaism? It's the Pharisees that survived the utter destruction of their people. Like, people, you have to define Judaism. In Jesus's day, there was not just Judaism proper. Judaism had 4 sects, and only one of them became Judaism that we know of today. That's the Pharisees. But there's this line in like Matthew where even Jesus says, like, yeah, we're not Jews. Well, not the temple kind. He says, like, Jesus is fighting with the priests. He's fighting with the rabbis. He's fighting with the Jews. And Jesus says, like, you claim that if you lived in the days of the prophets, you wouldn't kill them, but you've just admitted your ancestors killed the prophets. So, and then he has this baseline where, like, so you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. So it's kind of Jesus saying, like you fucking Jews, forgive my language. I don't want the video game mark, but and then he goes on, like, being like, I'm gonna send Christians against you, basically. This is in Matthew 23. You read it on your own time. But it's one of these, like, baselines where Jesus says that there's a lot of evidence that there's actually 2 religions in the Old Testament, not one. There's the temple cult that became Judaism, and then there's the rural the rural prophets who were never really part of the temple cult. They always, like, they were actually at war with it. And most of the Old Testament is the prophets warring against the temple cult and how the temple cult was going astray. That's Moses' religion, and Moses himself said these people are doomed. They're fucking doomed. So, like, if people want to call Christianity a Jewish religion, I will contend with the fact that even the Old Testament differentiates between the Jews and the prophets.
Right, because the quote-unquote Jews we have today that we know as the Jewish power bloc, they don't really have anything to do with the roots that created the roots behind the Christianity we have. It was divergent even back then, is what you're saying.
And again, like, being that I have some family in that part of the world that like, not directly, I never really, they were all dead by the time I was born, but it made me want to look up history. Basically, most of what you call Judaism today is a medieval invention. Like, the religion basically died after the Romans destroyed the religion, and then it resurrected in, like, a few synagogues in Babylon and Egypt. Like, this what you call Judaism is fundamentally from Babylon and Egypt. It's not from Jerusalem. What was in Jerusalem were the Christians who converted and then fled when the Romans came to destroy the temple. The temple was completely destroyed as a testimony of God's rejection of that religion. So I'm sorry.
Don't get me started on the Talmud. I'll be here all day.
The Talmud's a fiction invented or something like that. But no, I mean, like, I could go on and on about this. But anyway, the point of the poster was, like, listen, white people, God has a promise for you that he didn't get. Like, the prophecy that in that poster for Europeans was not meant for Jewish people. It was a promise to white people.
Nice. Well said. Well said. Now, a man who wishes to lead must turn his back to the crowd. This is beautiful. Tell me about this one.
Yeah, this is I think this is another Gomez de Villa quote. I think this is a quote. I forget where I read it, but I'm pretty sure I read it in one of his collected works, and it's something of a rewriting of it. He read something like that. I think the de Villa quote is something like, a man who wants to write a great orchestra must turn his back on the crowd. But I took the imagery of that quote and remade it into a more Anglo-Saxon way of understanding it. A man who wishes to lead must turn his back on the crowd. There's a leader of an orchestra turning his back on the crowd. I think it's a powerful, dialectic. You might have heard the phrase, but
Oh yes.
yeah, like this is an anti-populist propaganda. There's this idea that a great leader must face the crowd to lead them, when in reality he must turn to his special skilled people to give the people a better way. No great leader leads off of the populace. He
Right.
appeals to the populace with his like knights, his paladins, his close kin. And in this case, a conductor and his musicians. This is kind of like, if you want to change your current elite, you have to find new elite.
Couldn't agree more. All right, let's move on and do a couple more here before we end. Why don't you pick the next one?
That one right next to it was kind of funny. I think you'll like that one. The text on that one.
That which you tolerate will never tolerate you. That is very well said, and we see the effects of that playing out right now.
Yeah, I think the image speaks for itself. We can move on, but I just wanted you to get it. I don't know if you've seen that one before, but it was a pretty fun one.
I have seen most of your images because I have lurked your entire Telegram.
Yeah.
Speak Telegram for those that are listening. Let's invite people to that again. Let's see. I had that link available. I'm just going to scroll up and grab it. Give me just a second here. I know it's up here somewhere.
Well, you might have gone away.
There it is.
There we go.
There it is. Copy clean link. There it is. All right. This is the link to the Telegram where you can find all of his artwork as well as the other things that he chooses to share for the Restoration Bureau. So if this conversation and this artwork is interesting to you, consider giving him a follow. You can also find him on Twitter. And he has a Substack, which is in the description below.
I think we have 5 minutes left, right? So we should probably just scroll through the posters if you like anything, and we can do like a kind of exit. That last one there, the devil one was pretty fun. I also have one against potatoes. Yeah, that was inspired by Turnip Seed's recent posting against certain things in his own denomination. But yeah, I mean, like essentially, if you know, this is from architecture, the architecture world, because I'm in the architecture world professionally. You can tell who designed a building by like the metrics and the ratios that are from the designer's hand, right? Like there's an inseparable connection between a designer and what he makes. Like almost
sounds a bit Masonic, if you ask me.
Yeah. Like if you see certain symbols in a building, you know who made it, right? But in the same way, like once you know the metrics of your foe, then all of his constructs will be shown. Like you can tell who built what. And this goes beyond buildings. This also goes to language and culture and things like that. So like if you see people using certain terms, you know they're what you call anti-white, right? Like there's a set of terminologies that they all share between each other as an academic body. And once you know them, you can identify the products that are made from that. You don't have to have any evidence. You know who taught who.
And like we talked about earlier with the whole empty mind, blank slate thing, if you don't have something positive to fill the void, then you haven't really achieved much. That's why I talk about the positive framework of we need to take all of these isms, whether it's a communism or a capitalism or a feminism or whatever, and we label them anti-male, anti-white, anti-Christian, because then we control the narrative of language, and therefore we control the crafting of the ideas around them in other people's minds. And that is what our foes have done to us to weaken us and to program our minds. We have to fight on this battlefield, and having our own metrics to go by, our own framework of language, I think that is a very positive way to fight back against this, not just neutralizing the enemy propaganda, but enshrining our own in the minds of our allies and countrymen.
Yeah. And two images up from this one is something kind of like about like, what has been called the failure of conservatism. Like,
Yes.
there is nothing left to
We
conserve.
talk about that a lot on my channel, as you might know.
Yeah, like your enemies have completely annihilated like a generation of things that would have been worth conserving. At this point, you should just abandon the idea of conserving it. You should restore it because there's nothing
Yes.
left to conserve. Like, it's all gone. Everything's been destroyed. You have to
Yeah, the
restore
tree
it
has
now.
been rootless for so long; it's dead and not coming back.
Yeah, you have to start becoming like. And anytime someone wants to call themselves a conservative, you always have to ask, conserve what, right?
Yeah.
Always ask, conserve. What are you conserving? I've kind of taken up to the I started calling myself more of a restorationist than a conservative, because like, what the hell do conservatives conserve? What are you conserving? Nothing. You're just
Nothing, and they never have. I have hated conservatives for years, not from a stupid leftist angle, but from a neutral angle of the people who have called themselves conservatives since before I was born. Not only have they conserved nothing of value, they seem to actively promote the destruction and the agenda of what the anti-whites call progress.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, they're only conserving progress. The little text in there says that. I forget what I wrote, but like the only thing they're conserving is the speed. They're conserving the speed of progress. They're not actually conserving your values.
Right.
So and I kind of like the word restorationist or restore, because like, to restore is to progress, but not in their direction, right? You're progressing.
Yeah, no, restoration's a great word because it says, hey, look at this beautiful thing of the past. Let's use the tools of modernity to make it great as it once was, but in a new way. And I think that restoration should be our word for, quote, progress or progressivism, because we're not just progressing, we are restoring a glory and an order to things that was great and did function, but we have to do it with new tools, with modern tools.
Yeah, and to conserve is inherently something of a surrender and a like, I'm going to hold into what's left, right? Like, the word conserve is like, there's only something, there's a very small thing left. I have to limit it. I have to like protect it. Okay, but you're not growing it. Like, you can't grow as a conserving movement.
Right,
To
exactly.
conserve inherently means to like shrink or resist shrinking. Restore means to expand and restore and like grow and glorify, basically. It's a better word to
Absolutely.
use.
Yeah, glorification is very important. But also, it's important to choose what it is you glorify. And with that being said, there's only a couple of images left. We will do this one quickly. It's
Yeah,
similar to the other one.
that was not mine. That's a mid-century German one that's based off of John Hurt. So after John Hartfield got kicked out of Germany, the mid-century Germans made a lot of art based off his style. And this one was the inspiration for that feeling liberated yet image. You can see the similarities.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then we will go ahead and finish with this image. Rusted and unused is a fate far worse than being bruised. What punches did you take to restore today?
Yeah,
tell me about this one.
It was a quick one. This one didn't take too long on, but I was reading. I have a lot of book of poems around here, and I saw this something similar to this. I rewrote it into this that was like a bit more like tangential to what people experience. It's kind of like it's almost like an anti-fragile statement, anti-fragility, where like, take a punch, take the beatings. It's better to be hurt than it is to be lazy and unused and rusting away to nothing, right?
Yes, I agree.
It's also to some degree an encouragement to young men to like stop pussyfooting away from like just asking someone out or doing something, or like trying to get themselves established. Ask for a raise, ask for more, push a little bit harder. You're just getting used and abused, basically.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and stop sharing this, and we have come to the end of the stream. And what that means is we have to move to community engagement. There's not a lot of it today, so it won't take too awful long. But if you have things to say to my guest or to myself about the topic today, get your comments and questions in now. Over on Entropy, you could use the question widget if you don't want to spend money to do so. If you do want to share some money, you can do so with a paid chat on Entropy. Over on Subscribe Star, you can send a tip if you're already a sub there. You can send short messages on Cash App and PayPal. And of course, you can send me a hyper chat over on Odyssey. And speaking of these things, I have them refreshed now. We're going to start with Catherine on PayPal. This is one that came in at the end of my last stream, so we're going to read this one now. Catherine says, enjoyed the stream. It's good that we're starting to talk about the culture we want to build. Yes, Catherine, I agree with you. And over on Cash App, we have a couple of things here. We have, now I'm not going to read your name because I think this is your real name on Cash App, and I don't want to dox you. But from Michael, whose last name is an M, Michael M, for $5, thank you. He says, morning hails and white positivity. Well, white positivity to you and yours too, friend. Thank you very much. And we also have the Artificer. For $20. Thank you so much. That's a great gift. Thank you so much. He says, thank you so much, Yiz, for you and this creator. This is mind-blowing stuff. Well, I hope that's high praise, Luthemplar.
Yeah. I'm glad people like it. I hope people get like get a little vitality out of it to face the oppressions that they face every day from the regime.
Absolutely. And your artwork can be found, of course, at the Telegram that I linked earlier. You can also follow him on Twitter. And also, Luthemplar shares his thoughts in well laid out Substack articles as well. You can find him there. Over on Entropy, we have for $10 US. Thank you so much, friend. We have Cinder Mountain, a guy who I've traveled around with and met in person. Cinder says, what would Luthemplar would Luthemplar ever consider making a film based in the Restoration Bureau world?
He's
a filmmaker, by the way. That's what he does.
Yeah, I mean, like before there was the Restoration Bureau, I've had this idea of a video game in that kind of same aesthetic for a few years now. I have a working VR prototype of it, but I never really. It's something I tinker with occasionally. Maybe one day you'll see a game with that aesthetic out in the market on Steam. But
that would be awesome. I would love to see that.
Yeah, for now it's just a little thing I tinker with occasionally. Yeah.
Because like most of us, you have a full-time job you have to get to, so you don't have time.
I'm trying to get licensed in several states for architecture, and until that's done, I'm pretty much just not majorly engaged with anything.
Okay. The last one that we have for now is from Shelly. Good to see you here, sister. Always glad for you to stop by and say howdy. And when you can make the time, like I said, you're definitely invited to be on a community stream or a Discord at Dragons with me one day, and you certainly have to come to my camping trip this year. For $5 US, Shelly says, just sending a little love again. I don't get to listen or chat as much as I'd like, but I do appreciate all that you do. And she sends a little white heart. Well, thank you so much, sister. I do appreciate that. And Luthemplar, we've come to the end of the stream. It's about 2 hours. I thought we would go a little long in the tooth, but I wanted to make sure that your ideas and what you had to share and the reasons behind them got out today. And I think we did a good job of showcasing your art project here. And is there anything that you would like to leave in closing about the subject matter? Anything you want to leave with the people before we say our goodbyes?
Oh yeah, I was just looking at the comments and someone was saying, I wonder if the Romans had these discussions as their empire burned. They did. There's a text you should read known as, I think it's called De Redito So. It's by Rutilius Claudius Nematius. I'll just post a link. But he wrote a book called My Journey Home to Gaul, in which he documents, I think it was 6 years after the fall of Rome to the Goths or something, and he basically wrote a journal as he was going home to Gaul, visiting all the ruins of what used to be the Roman Empire. He was a bureaucrat in Rome, and so after the empire failed, he was kind of out of a job. so he was returning home to Gaul to go visit his homeland. Which it is interesting that many Roman subjugated peoples retain the understanding of their ethnos under that empire. So Gauls were still Gauls even though they were Romans. And so he's a Gallo-Roman.
I would argue that any healthy empire does that, because stripping someone's ethnicity creates radicals and malcontent that will hate you forever.
Yeah, I put the quote, the Wikipedia article for him in the private chat if you want to share it. But essentially, his journal, My Journey Home to Gaul, documents him visiting several towns, trying to rebuild in the ashes. He finds a statue of his dad, who's also a bureaucrat, and he's like being well respected by the locals, and he kind of gets this sense of foreboding that even though the empire is gone, civilization is going to come back. It's a beautiful work of Dark Age literature. Just absolutely fascinating that people had these thoughts at the end of the Roman Empire, and there's another line where he's like saying like, you know, like there used to be highways to Gaul, but they're all rotten now, so I'm gonna have to take a boat. It's like he just says that has these like little tiny details. He's also there's a lot of speculation as to what he was religiously, because he appears to be very much in the pagan tradition, and so all of his references are to like classical gods and stuff like that. And you know, this is a thing that happened because the people forget that the Germans that conquered Rome were Arian Christians. They were like a heretic group. They weren't like pagan Germans. They were Christianized Germans. The conquerors of Rome were Arian, or Arius, not Arian the ethnicity, the Arius the religious tradition. And so so for many Romans, seeing their empire getting conquered by these Christian Germans, some of them went back to the old classical gods, and so this story references a lot more of the classical gods of Rome than anything Christian. It seems to be a very anti-Christian book, so you know, even as a Christian, I kind of enjoy it as like the contrast. To me, Christianity is a fundamentally, in Europe, it's a fundamentally German religion, and the classical versions of it, that's Catholicism, that still had to become Germanized under the German hierarchy. A lot of stuff for another time, but it's a great book. My Journey Home to Gaul. It's a good text to read, to see how people thought and processed the fall of the Roman Empire as it was happening.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining me today. You're fun, you're witty. I love talking to you. You're definitely welcome to come on Discordant Dragons whenever you want. I know that you've been on there once, I think, maybe twice, and you're definitely welcome to come back. And of course, the olive branch is extended. Anything you want me to do with you, if you want me to come to a stream that you're on, or invite me to any type of project you're working on behind the scenes, I'm glad to help and contribute with whatever it is you're building if you would like my assistance.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see you when I'm done getting my architecture stuff done. But
all right.
That's like a year down the road. So I'll see you in 2024 for the election.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, you can find the links to his Twitter, his Substack, and of course the Restoration Bureau itself in the comments down below. This stream, of course, is safe to leave up on YouTube for now, so it will be remaining on YouTube as well as on Odyssey and DLive for 3 days. And this is the part of the stream where I encourage you to please subscribe to me on Rumble. I am trying to get to 100 subs so I can live stream to my Rumble channel. And I'm going to be sharing that here. Even if you never plan to use Rumble, please just create a throwaway account where you can give me a sub over there. I very much would like the ability to stream to Rumble. And when I get to 100 subs on Rumble and I can stream there, I have made the command decision to stop using Restream and shift to using StreamYard, because I don't like Restream and I don't like this stupid Ukrainian branding I'm forced to use even when I pay their monthly fee. So I will be shifting over to StreamYards at some point this year. So help make that happen by getting me to 100 subs over on Rumble. I love you all. Thank you for supporting me monthly. And of course, we are going to be having a fun episode of Discordant Dragons tomorrow night. So come hang out with me for some fun memes, some arguments, some laughs, and of course, getting some friends of mine to share their thoughts about the ridiculousness of Clown World together as we laugh in merriment and celebrate white positivity. So with that being said, I love you all. Have a great Sunday evening. And for those of you that are part of the White Wellbeing community, I'll see you on Jason's stream here in a little while. So keep heart, everyone. Until next time.